Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Anton Warrenchuk in Baltimore, and here to continue our conversation about the Ukrainian parliamentary elections is Ivan Katchanovski. He teaches at the School of Political Studies and the Department of Communication at the University of Ottawa in Canada. He is the author of Cleft Countries, Regional Political Divisions and Cultures in Post-Soviet Ukraine and Moldova, and is the co-author of the Historical Dictionary of Ukraine. Thanks for joining us, Ivan.
Thank you for inviting me.
Some of the major issues that are facing Ukraine right now are economic. I mean, the country has mostly suffered a significant decline in the standard of living in about the 2 decades since its independence from the USSR. The currency has seen a great collapse in its value, and the economy is expected to shrink through the next year. What are the economic policies that the new parliament is putting forth?
I think the economic policies which are suggested and proposed by the new parliament, or that will be likely adopted by the new parliament, I think, in my opinion, would be basically continuation of the old policies, because Prime Minister Yatsenyuk and many members of his government are likely to stay in their positions, or maybe they might change their titles, but they will still basically influence economic policy of the new government. And then this policy actually, I think, is responsible for kind of economic crisis which take place now in Ukraine, because these policies are very, very populist policies. Ukrainians were promised by the government a lot of benefits. They were promised by politicians corruption, widespread corruption, and ability to live and travel in members of the European Union. Membership in the European Union was also promised, visa-free travel to European countries, and economic growth was considered to be, again, kind of a result of the European orientation and joining association agreement with the European Union. But actually, likely, this was strategy in order to win popular support, because actually their policies which were implemented just gave opposite results. Now we have a decline in industrial output. We also have a decline in economic in other sectors of the economy. We have a major crisis in the east, which actually, because Donbass is an area which was one of the major centers of industrial production and economic areas, kind of very developed economic areas in Ukraine, and one of the major areas of Ukrainian export. And now we have a currency, basically, Ukrainian currency devaluated against the dollar and other currencies like euro. And Ukraine also faces not only declining production in terms of major sectors of the economy, but also crisis and energy crisis. So actually, it's not certain whether Ukraine would have sufficient energy resources actually to be able to just basically heat houses and apartments for people and for use by industry during winter because of this conflict with Russia.
The other major political issue right now in Ukraine is also the ongoing rebellions taking place, mostly centered in the regions of Donetsk, or the cities of Donestk and Lugansk. The elections are set to take place in these rebel-controlled areas on November 2nd. What do you expect the outcome to be?
I think the most important outcomes of the elections would not be actually who wins elections or which political force would win elections. I think it's very likely that these elections would be won by separatists or their representatives. Even so, they also, like the current elections in Ukraine, there are also kind of issues with kind of whether they were democratic or whether they were free and fair to a large extent, because of kind of politics also taking place in this region. But I think the major result of these elections, if they're going to take place, would be recognition of these elections and their results by the Russian government. So the Russian government basically said they're going to recognize such elections, and they supported such elections taking place. In contrast, the Ukrainian government said that basically such elections, if they would be held without agreement with the Ukrainian government, would escalate the conflict, and they can actually lead again to a resumption of a war, a civil war in this region. And so this again, kind of elections are very important in this area of Donbass. And Donbass did not participate in elections which took place on Sunday. Even so, there were certain regions which were controlled by the Ukrainian forces in Donbass. They participated in the elections on Sunday. There was very low turnout in this voter participation rate in this part of Donbass, and in these regions, the opposition bloc, basically former party of regions, leaders and activists won basically biggest support. And this is, I think, would be still a major problem for Ukraine. I think elections in Donbass are not going to solve issue. They would not lead to international recognition of these regions, but they already have de facto independence. And if Russia would recognize such election results, this means that basically Ukraine de facto would be again a country which suffered a de facto breakup. Even so, still de jure it would be a united country, but we have de facto control over large parts of Donbass by separatists who do not recognize the authority of the Ukrainian government. And if Russia recognizes the same, so basically we would have similar situation, which is currently is in Moldova or in Georgia, which means basically de facto breakup of country.
So this conflict, though, that's taken place in these eastern regions of Ukraine has also led to the creation of about 1 million displaced Ukrainians. About 500,000 have fled to Russia, and hundreds of thousands remain displaced within Ukraine. Is there any policy that the Parliament is putting forth to deal with this issue?
Since they still, it's again, I think they consider some legislation to deal with these issues, and they mostly focus on Ukrainians who are internally displaced people within Ukraine. They promise a lot of support in terms of finding them housing, in terms of providing money and other resources for people who moved from Donbass to other regions of Ukraine. But actually, if you look into practical implementation of these measures, they already basically kind of mean that most displaced people in Ukraine received very limited support, and they have a variety of problems in terms of finding housing in the new places, in new regions to which they moved. Also, issues with their jobs, trying to find jobs, and also issues about their political differences in terms of perceptions of them in the western, for example, regions of Ukraine. I think one of the issues which might be very important is that actually the current government of Ukraine said that they basically would try to introduce legislation of even academics who supported separatists or who did not move to other regions of Ukraine. So they actually basically certain repressions against certain even academics, even professors and so on, who stayed in these regions, or some of them because they actually tried to move universities to other areas of Ukraine. And the same, I think, related issue is issue of legislation. I think a lot of people who moved from Donbass and to other regions of Ukraine might have a problem with finding a job. They're finding jobs, permanent jobs, because of this law regarding legislation, which I think could be applied very broadly and can be used basically against such displaced people for political reasons.
Okay, Ivan Katchanovski, thank you so much for joining us.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you for joining us on the Real News Network.